Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Today I want to do a shorter video on sampling, and I know the last video was on sampling. This one is about turning samples into synthesizers. I've had a few comments about that, and I just kind of want to go over a few of my favorite techniques. Let's go into my recording preferences. First of all, my tracks are set up as such. The relevant ones are here. I have a through track here, which is playing through a reverb pedal, Empress Reverb. And let me just add some more reverb. Not that much. Okay, so I have a through track. I have 4 flex machines, which are attached, which have their record buffers set up. And they are all recording with the same settings, which is internally they are recording from the Q. The Q is set to track 7. They're also recording from CD, but I won't be using that today. And you can sort of imagine yourself in this situation. Maybe your through track is an instrument. Maybe it's plugged into your laptop. On top of that, I have these setups set to hold, the trigger setting, which means that if I hold down record 3, it will record from the 3rd recording source, which is Q. And that's what I'm going to be using primarily to sample today. So let's try out using a longer form. Say I'm like watching a YouTube video of a demo of a synth, and I hear a really cool pad. No, this isn't a pad. Like this. Okay, cool. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. You'll notice it cut off early, and that's because my record setup is only set to record 32. You can also set it to max. You can set it to 64. But just give yourself enough headroom that it won't stop before you want it to. I would recommend with things like hold that you set it to max, because then it goes as long as there's file space, and that's sort of more freeing up for, and that tends to be a bit more suited to what you're going to be doing with a hold trig. All right, so we have our file. And I have this extra little bit that I don't want because I'm really just trying to create one note. All right, so that's our file. I'm going to go into my settings and set loop mode to ping pong. And then I'm basically just going to tweak these options slightly. If I hold down function, I can move the length, the start and end points to 0 crossings, which is helpful because it doesn't create as much of a pop when I move back and forth across the wave, across the waveform. You'll notice that was a pretty good spot right there because it was a minimal transition. And then I can further mask the transition by adding some reverb. Oops. Let's add the keyboard here real quick. Yeah, you can barely hear it when it transitions. Right. So that's a really simple way to create a pad out of just a single note. Now, what if I want to extend the length of a note? With pads, it's a little more difficult because they have more complexity to their tone. But say I have a shorter, more synthy sound. Maybe like I'm watching a video of a Moog demonstration and there isn't too much modulation going on. Let's turn off the reverb. No. Cool, so this is kind of a good example. All right, let's go to the next track. So I'm just gonna play something as if I'm like watching a video and this is what I'm playing. What did I get? Right, so these notes. Let's shorten it down to one of the notes real quick. Hold on, I have an LFO on here. Right, cool. All right, so I'm gonna go to the loop setting as I did before. And remember to turn off your time stretch because if your time stretch is on, it will attempt to change pitch and also keep the timing and the speed of the note. But if you're using it as a synth, then you're going to get some artifacts that you don't want, unless you do want them. So just keep that in mind. Turning off time stretch allows it basically plays the sample back. It adjusts the rate to whatever the pitch is, kind of like an Ableton if you set it to pitch shift. When you warp things, it'll lower the pitch when you slow down samples, and this is kind of the same thing. But going into loop mode, I'm not going to choose ping pong this time because, as you know with ping pong, if you go back and forth, you can hear those spots, and the closer they are together, the more noticeable they are. So now going to loop mode on, I can set up, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, and you can see that in certain zoom settings, I can see certain patterns start to emerge, and that's really helpful for me, actually. I'm going to go back to the keyboard. Oh, wait, first I need to turn off reverb. Oh, and I also have a filter. Sorry. Okay. Now what we're looking for is a short enough sample loop that continues to keep the tone of the note without starting to what is that called? Like oscillate on itself? I don't know the technical term, but essentially it sounds like this. It changes the pitch because it's actually reading the frequency of the oscillation itself as a note. So you don't want that. This is where zero crossings is really important. And essentially what you're trying to do is create a looped waveform that mimics the movement of the original synth that you're sampling. Oh, there we go. I think that's Material Girl. Anyway, so there we have it. We have a pretty simple synth. And then on top of that, I can go back into my amp envelope and create a bit more character to it. Right. So on top of that, obviously you're going to lose some of the original signals. Character, for example, the OP1 here, has a very light LFO assigned to it. And there's just little things that are like that I think are built into this keyboard that give it some character, that create movement over time, and that sort of generates interest in your ear. On the Octatrack, you have to build that stuff in because it's playing a sample at a very fast rate. So it's very easy for the ears to get fatigued listening to the same exact kind of tone. It's almost like hearing a hum or something. So the way that I generate interest is I create an LFO that adjusts the source pitch by just a hair, by like maybe 1. at a very slow rate. And that gives me a little bit of extra oomph. On top of that, you can add a filter envelope. So there's my little synth. I'm going to tack on an extra little piece to this video, just in the interest of sort of talking about sampling sources that you don't have full control over, samples online, things like that. So when it comes to rhythmic sampling, this is how I do it. Say I have a rhythm on my Octatrack, or on my OP1. And it just so happens that my tempo is fairly similar, but let's say it's not. And I'm listening to this loop. I'm listening to this loop. I can tap, hold function and tap the tempo. I can get pretty close and find out that it's probably around this tempo, which it is. And so just go slightly before the beginning of the loop that you want. And leave a little bit after as well. Now we go into the audio editor. You can hear there's that slight. And then all you have to do is zoom in and make sure that it's right at the beginning. And you can set up loop here if you'd like. Here I would recommend doing time stretch to beat, because if you have it off, for example, and I'm trying to play something chromatic, you can hear it changing. So instead I'm going to set this to beat, which tries to preserve the rhythmic sounds. And then I'm going to set loop mode to on. And that's a good way to sort of just kind of hear by ear whether or not the loop is fairly close to what you had in mind. Cool. So now we just put it on the 1. Oop. Something going on. Right, so I just encountered some issues with the playback of the beat, and it's because I set the time stretch on without checking whether the original tempo was set to the actual tempo that I had recorded it at. So this is important, because if you have your sync set up to time stretch, then it will time stretch based on the predicted tempo based on the algorithm inside the machine. And I am here to say that the algorithm is not super good yet. Maybe in the future it might be, but at this very moment it is much better to just know what tempo that you're working at. The clicked in estimated tempo is quite good, but you have to adjust this one. And there we go. that's everything for today. My 3 sampling tips. Now, I highly recommend everybody just kind of go on YouTube and have at it. I personally have maybe not so ethical opinions about sampling, but I don't know, it's music. Just have fun with it. You can figure out all of the legal things once you get to a point where that's actually important. So yeah, just have fun. Search anything, any sound sample is game. Play around with it. Maybe make some granular synthesis things with it. Make some pads, and feel free to add in the comments below any questions you may have about this process or any other recommendations you have as far as your own personal preference. All right, thanks for watching.